For those of you who do not work directly in a nursing home, I'll tell you just very briefly what MDS is. MDS stands for Minimum Data Set, and starting in 1989, CMS began to implement a standardized assessment form throughout the United States called Minimum Data Set. It was never intended to be a complete assessment by CMS, although there's quite a disconnect between what CMS would like to see in terms of resident assessment and the large volume of information that we are required to gather just with the MDS. Beginning in October 2010, CMS rolled out MDS 3.0, which was a massive revision of multiple sections of the assessment form, skincare being a large revision, and Quality Insights of Delaware is working on skincare issues throughout the state. But another one that received a significant revision was Section Q. Prior to 2010, nursing homes did not have this expanded expectation from CMS related to Section Q. We've devoted this morning about an hour and a half to talk about this, and we looked at very carefully the evaluations that we received from October 5th. And some of the folks who were in the room felt that because they were not nursing home social workers, that MDS 3.0 information, or my section of the presentation, really did not relate to them. And we talked a lot about that, and I have to say that I somewhat disagree. Although you may not code MDS section Q, you may not work in a nursing home. If you work for the state, it's very important for you to understand the internal transition process and what the federal requirements are of nursing homes related to making referrals to the ADRC. So although this information is extremely dry, it's not the most exciting presentation that you'll hear this month, maybe not even the most exciting presentation that you'll hear this week. It is required. It's part of the requirement that the ADRC that received their grant funding from the Administration on Aging, that this training is mandatory. And as we go through it, you're going to see that CMS is aligning all of their goals across many settings, and that will include state survey, to align with resident choice, resident-centered preferences and needs, and bringing their community and home-based services, a rebalancing of financial resources at the federal level. So that being said, let's begin. I'm really here to discuss the intent and the goal of Section Q of the MDS. And certainly I'm not an MDS coding expert, but that being said, I think that the information you receive here today will clearly help you in completion of this very important instrument. The CMS design for this section provides a process that recognizes the residents' needs and preferences. And as Director Love said earlier this morning, most people want to live in the community. So that CMS is pulling together its goals. It's marrying and creating a synergism between the community and the skilled nursing facility services in person-centered care planning. CMS at the national level, and certainly the state of Delaware, is building systems and rebalancing resources to serve the individual's preferences. So these are big changes. Any of you who've read the book, Who Moved My Cheese, what we are doing is we are flipping the paradigm. And we're in exciting times in healthcare because there are many changes happening within the national arena. There's a big shift to building community-based systems capacity. And we know that states are in various stages and that Delaware is working very hard. But it takes time to build infrastructure. And so we've heard this morning about some adaptations that the ADRC has already made just since October 5th in listening to the voice of our partners, the long-term care community, who are providers of services to nursing homes residents, and also listening to the residents themselves. So CMS at the national level acknowledges that there are challenges in building infrastructure to help nursing home staff with transitions. And if you go to www.cms.gov and go to the Community Initiatives section and scroll down, and we'll do this in a few minutes, and download the training that occurred in April of 2010, you will find one of the key questions was, CMS has the expectation that Section Q is amped up, and yet in most nursing homes, there's only one social worker. How do CMS respond to this stretching of resources? And the answer was that CMS is gathering data and understands that there are problems and significant pulls on the resources of the current social worker within the nursing home. And so they're aware that there is some growing pains going on within the system. And they acknowledge it, and that we may not be there yet, but federal and state resources are focused on building this infrastructure capacity. So to talk about the intent of Section Q, it's basically intended to record the participation and the expectations of the resident, their family member, or significant others, and to understand the resident's overall goals. What we know is that residents who actively participate in the interview and conversation portion of this assessment process often experience an improved quality of life and higher quality of care that's based on their needs, their goals, and their priorities. So that the key message that I have for an hour and a half to try to engage everyone in is that when the interdisciplinary team, earmarked and headed by the social worker, engages the resident in active conversation when appropriate, during this assessment process, then we get a higher quality of care, we meet the intent of Section Q, and we end up with better outcomes for our residents. However, if the resident is unable to participate in the assessment process, it's very important that we talk with the family member, significant other, or legal guardian in those rare cases, who can provide valuable information about the resident's needs, goals, and priorities. The day after October 5th presentation, it was October 6th, Sharon Dickel at the Jewish Family Services received an email from a social worker who had attended our presentation. And the question was very interesting. The question was, so, are you saying, based on the training, that residents with dementia should not be asked Section Q 100 questions? And Sharon forwarded that question on to me. And it's a very good question because the social worker wanted a definitive yes or no. And there is no definitive yes or no to that question. The answer to that question is, do you interview the resident for Section Q? The answer is, if the resident can provide clear answers regarding their preferences, then yes, you do interview them. So the diagnosis of dementia is not really one that would forbid you or would foreclose the possibility that the resident be interviewed. It's whether or not the resident can verbally or non-verbally state their preferences. That's how you determine whether or not they're part of the interview process. The entire section is designed to give the resident access to information so they can make choices. Section Q is a bridge to community services for residents. And for nursing home staff, especially social workers, there are expectations as well as expanded requirements around discharge planning. The MDS 3.0 increases the resident's voice and increases person-centered care planning. My goal is to encourage all the Delaware long-term care stakeholders, the ADRC, transition coordinators, whether they're in hospital or nursing home, case manager, social workers, and nurses to seek opportunities to collaborate. And as you can see with this bridge, we have the resident as the center of the bridge, and we have the nursing home staff helping and supporting the resident, and then we have the ADRC staff and the MFP and care transitions team supporting the resident on the other side. The question came up earlier this morning, and it's right here in my notes. Not all residents who have the desire can have their care needs met in the community, but with our help, many of them can. And for those who can, it will take a team approach to making that happen. So for us within the nursing home world, and that is my area, my career background, we should look at Section Q as being a new opportunity for discharge planning collaboration. It's important that we meaningfully engage residents in their own discharge goals. It's important that we directly ask the resident what they want to do. It's important that we provide linkages for the resident to the ADRC. And we had some dialogue earlier this morning that talked about some barriers and maybe some imperfections in our system, but we all need to continue to work together. Section Q also promotes collaboration between the nursing home and ADRC for those residents who are going to need continuing support services once they're in the community. But it's very clear that there is the expectation that the nursing home staff do referrals to the ADRC for those residents who express desire to learn about possible transitions and options counseling. These are the 3 key points of my presentation. That you are expected to contact the ADRC using the methods that they've outlined, and that goes beyond just submitting the MDS. The state system clearly indicates that you must send an email, a fax to the ADRC, and we're going to go through a demonstration of the process and a reminder. But the MDS 3.0 Section Q submission is not sufficient to send a referral to the ADRC. It requires an email and or a fax. And then the ADRC staff are expected to respond to the nursing home staff by providing information, and so you have that expectation. And if that does not occur, you need to try to contact them to find out, what is going on. If that is problematic for you, you can always contact the Ombudsman's office. They're a resource that you can utilize if you feel the ADRC staff is not responsive to your needs. Finally, the nursing home and the ADR staff are expected to work collaboratively and meaningfully engage the resident as the third part of that partnership to work on a discharge and transition plan and to collaboratively work out arrangements necessary for community-based services. So at this point, what I would like to suggest you do is open your packet and pull out the MDS Section Q copy. So the first item is Section Q100. Do you all have it? And it's about resident participation. It looks like this. It's very, very basic. They want to know who participated. A, did the resident participate in the assessment? Did the family or significant other, or was it a guardian or legal representative? The definition of resident participation is that the resident actively engages in interviews and conversations as necessary to meaningfully contribute to the completion of the MDS 3.0. So the coding is very straightforward, yes or no. The RIA manual had a change in May of 2011 that you may not be aware of. It tells us that when the family significant others are involved, what is important that the response selected must reflect the resident's perspective if he or she is able to express it, and that family or significant others does not include nursing staff. So for section 100, it's extremely easy. You just want to know who actually participated in the actual assessment for the remaining 4 questions. Question QO300. Here the key emphasis is the resident's overall expectation or goal. The key point is to ask the resident and to ascertain the resident's goal. Sometimes it's better to wait until after the resident has participated in other sections and other portions of this assessment so that they have a better understanding of their own current situation and the implications of alternative choices. CMS also recognizes that some residents are unable to provide a clear response. If the resident's unable to communicate their preference, the information can be obtained from the family, etc. If the goals have not already been stated directly by the resident and documented since admission, please ask the resident directly what his or her expectation is regarding the outcome of this nursing home admission and return to the community. You can encourage the involvement of the family if the resident consents, but again, the answer should reflect what the family believes the resident would want. And so as a social worker, you are in a key position to understand the nuances of verbal and nonverbal communication as well as family dynamics. And so the goal here is to capture what the resident wants or what the resident would want if they were able to clearly express that. We have to record what the resident's wishes are as they're expressed, whether they're realistic or not. It is no time for the nursing home team to make a judgment. MDS is not interested in our information about our critical and important clinical information and judgment call about the resident. What they want to capture here only is what the resident's expectation and goal might be, so that it's resident-driven rather than what the nursing home staff judges to be in the best interest of the resident. It just focuses on exploring the resident's options, not whether or not the staff considers them to be good options or poor options. The intent of QO300 is that the resident should be provided options as well as access to information that will then allow him or her to make their own decisions and to be supported in directing his or her care planning. This is directly from the Olmstead Act, where the 2 Georgia residents were living in the nursing facility because the nursing facility staff felt that that was the best place for them. And the Supreme Court said no, that it is the resident's decision. So here you record the resident's expectations, whether they're realistic or not. Again, if the resident is unable to communicate with you verbally or non-verbally, or has been legally determined to be incompetent, the information can be obtained from the family, etc. Now I want to take a minute here and talk about the term incompetent, because we had some interesting questions on our previous session. And I've worked in nursing homes, and we become very possessive, and we become very caring and nurturing, and in many cases we do become a family for residents. But in the legal sense of the term, we are not their legal family, we are not their legal guardian. Oftentimes within our own team meetings we use terms like incompetent or unable to make decisions, but actually the term incompetence is a legal term that can only be administered following a legal process in which physicians, lawyers, and a judge are involved. So only a judge can determine whether a person is incompetent. And that's a very important term because we work in institutions that house people, and we have to be very careful. And you are the gatekeepers. The social service department is the gatekeeper of that. Because nursing departments, and I'm a nurse, We really do want to be nurturing and caregiving, and sometimes we get blurry on our lines. So we look to you as social workers to always bring us back that this is an individual with their own rights, that they're a citizen, and that they have the right of self-determination. If you look at your handout, O300 is very easy. O300A, select 1 for residents' overall goal. Code 1 if they expect to be discharged to the community. 2 if they expect to remain in the facility. 3 are going to a different facility. Or 9, unknown. So now let's play a little game. I'm going to give you a couple examples. Let's play How Would You Code? All right. You're to take a look at just your coding. We're looking at O300. And we have a 55-year-old married woman who had a CVA 2 weeks ago, was hospitalized. She came to your facility a week ago. She came for rehab for gait training, transfer in and out of a wheelchair, and some other occupational ADLs. She's extremely motivated to return home. Her husband is supportive, and he's been busy getting the house ready for her to come back so she can be independent. Her goal is to return home once she has completed rehab. So let's play How Would You Code? O300A should be coded as 1, expects to be discharged to the community. O300B would be coded as 1, resident, because she has clear expectations and wants to return to her home. Very good, you scored 100%. Let's continue playing How Would You Code? Now we have a 93-year-old resident who has chronic renal failure, she's oxygen dependent, and she has moderate dementia. When she's asked about her care preferences, she's really unable to voice a consistent preference and just says, "What a lovely day outside." When her daughter is asked about her mother's goals for care, the daughter says, "I really cannot care for her adequately at home anymore. I just want her to be comfortable." How would you code? Question QA would be coded as 9. Question B, 2. All right. Mrs. T is not able to respond, so that her mother will probably remain in the nursing home where she will be made comfortable for her remaining days. Okay, my last one. 40-year-old resident with cerebral palsy and a learning disability. She lived in a group home for 5 years, but after a hospitalization for pneumonia, she was admitted to the nursing home for respiratory therapy. Although her group home bed is no longer available, she's now stable, and there's no medical reason why she could not transition back to the community. She states she wants to return to the group home. Her legal guardian agrees that she should return to a small group home. How would you code? 300A would be coded as 1. 300B would be coded as 3. All right, and the rationale is that she's able to respond and says she'd like to go back to the home, but is unable to make decisions about her medical and other care. When the legal guardian was told that Mrs. K is medically stable and would like to go back to the community, she decided that it's in her best interest to be transferred to a group home. And a group home is considered to be a community setting. So what we're really talking about here is the dignity of choice. The point is to ask the resident. Now, this step in no way guarantees discharge, but it just provides an opportunity for the resident to interact with the ADRC experts. I have to repeat it. Nursing home staff must not make an interdisciplinary determination that the discharge is not feasible without consulting the resident if the resident can be interviewed. Remember, federal law gives residents a right to receive services in the least restrictive and most integrated setting. Let's look at 0400, discharge planning. Some will be able to return to the community with support. They have the right to do so, and important progress has been made in the state of Delaware so that individuals have more choices, more options, and more available supports. And last time we had this session, we had a home health nurse stand and talk about the fact that they take care of residents with vents, PEG tubes, IVs. Very complicated medical care is being provided to residents in their home, especially for those who want to be in their home. Let's look at 0400. The first portion of the question asks us, is there an active discharge in place for the resident to return to the community? It's a yes or a no question. If there's an active discharge plan in place, and you answer yes, there's an automatic skip pattern that you would go then to 0600, to the referral. If the answer is no, then we need to speak a little bit more about that. For Q0400B, the question is, what determination was made by the resident and the care planning team regarding discharge to the community? And you have three options if you look on the form. Determination not made, determination made to be feasible, and again, that's a skip pattern. You would go straight to the referral, and discharge to community determined to be not feasible. And then you would skip to the next active section. Let's play How Would You Code? All right, my first example is a 45-year-old woman. We're looking at question 0400. She weighs 300 pounds and she's cognitively intact. She has congestive heart failure with shortness of breath requiring oxygen at night. She requires assistance with ADLs for bathing and toileting. And she's lived at the nursing home for 3 years. She came to the nursing home because at that time her family and friends could not care for her at home. Although she expresses interest in talking to someone about returning to the community, the interdisciplinary team is uncertain whether there would be sufficient community resources available and whether her family would agree to the discharge. How would you code? 400B would be coded as 1. Discharge to the community is determined to be feasible, and then you would skip to 600 because it is possible that there are services available at this time. The rationale for that is that she expressed the desire to talk to someone about the return to the community, and the ADRC folks can help address the interdisciplinary team's legitimate concerns about available and sufficient community resources, particularly about housing and whether the family support will be present. Any questions? Okay, one more. All right, we have an 82-year-old widowed woman with advanced Alzheimer's. She has no family, and she's resided at the nursing home for 4.5 years. The resident is not able to be interviewed. For Q400B, how would you code? 2. Discharge to the community is determined to be not feasible, and you would skip to the next active assessment section, V or X. The rationale is she's not able to be interviewed, and there's no family or other person to support her in the community. Any questions about that? Yes.
So at what point would you use the determination not made? Because I would have thought for the first scenario, you would use that since you're not sure if it's a feasible discharge or not. So at what point would you use that one?
I believe what you're asking me is for question Q04B, what determination was made by the resident and the care planning team that discharge to community is feasible? When would you code a 0? Determination not made. Very seldom would you code 0. You would code 0 primarily in situations where it wasn't so much that you were unsure, because I believe the examples lead you almost clearly to select 1 or 2, but it would be that you were not able to summon the resources to make a determination whether to pick 1 or 2. So you received the case late.
You have a resident come in and within 24 hours they're back in the hospital?
Yes, something like that, where somehow you were unable to pull together the resources to make a determination. When in doubt, you should be sending referrals to the ADRC. And a portion of this program is designed to begin to build bridges so that you're not out there on your own, so that you can pick up the phone and talk to the ADRC. And in terms of coding, remember that Section Q was expanded to protect the residents' rights. So I would always err on the code that would allow the resident to explore their options or to fulfill their expectations and goals. So that if in 0300, going back to 0300A, the resident expected to be discharged to the community, I would be very, very reluctant to code 0400B, discharge is determined to be not feasible, because that's a disconnect. And I wouldn't want to make that determination independent of a contact with the experts in resources available in the home and community-based services. Is that helpful? Good. Every resident in long-term care receives this assessment on admission and quarterly, so that there would be a minimum of 4 assessments. Now, there are skip patterns built into Section Q. If the resident has already indicated in a previous assessment that they're interested in going out to the community and exploring their options, we don't keep asking them over and over again. There are some skip patterns, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But this is a federal requirement that every resident that lives in a nursing home receive this assessment, a minimum of 4 times a year. Good question. Yes, the resident has the goal to be discharged. The interdisciplinary in-house nursing home team has already worked and contacted the ADRC and the money follows the person group. The resident, to the best of her ability, and the nursing home discharge team on her behalf understand what her options are, and she's received her options. She is unwilling or unable to participate, and she has no family support services. Discharge is unfeasible. Would you all agree? Yes. Good question. Very good question. But the key part that I would like to say, I'm getting this look from my gentleman friend in the front. The key part that happened here that I think is very important, and Chris, help me if I'm wrong, is that you have assisted her at least to give her the best possible scenario and options that she can have, that you've worked with the team outside of the nursing home. This hasn't happened in a vacuum within the nursing home. And I think that's very important, because there is we don't want it to appear that we have a vested interest in keeping these residents. We want to obey their rights. You've worked with the team and you've documented that you've explored her options with her and she's unable or unwilling and there are no family supports available. Good question.
Let's take her same scenario, but the person does have family within the community. However, with Adult Protective Services, the reason why she ended up in the nursing home is because the family said they were going to do things and didn't follow through.
Right.
But yet the family would come forth and say, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. They've already financially exploited them, so forth and so on. Okay, so the protective services doesn't seem feasible because she's already been exploited by the family. So how would that situation work out with this?
That's another wonderful question. I'm going to repeat it for the audience. The resident may or may not be expressing an interest in being discharged, but the family is eager to have the resident discharged. Either adult protective services has been involved, and that might be the reason that the resident is in the nursing home, or the nursing home team, led by the social worker and discharge planning group, has a suspicion that the resident may or has already been exploited in a variety of ways, probably financial, by this family. So there's a question about her security and her safety, the motives that they have for caring for her, and whether or not they will be able to follow through and care for her should she be discharged. This is the perfect example of when you really do need to get the ADRC team involved, because you need an extra set of experts in the community that have the resources and the contacts to make sure that this resident is not sent home to a questionable situation. And we've spoke about that at our debriefing meeting. And I'm going to ask that we hold this question again till the end. And we're going to have the team talk about this, because the team definitely wants this group to know that they're very aware and they care very deeply about residents' vulnerability in the community. This is not just, you know, let's get them out of nursing homes and get them into their homes and, you know, everything's going to work out great. This is a team who has experience and understands that not every family is going to be able to live up to their commitment, whether covertly or overtly. We know that there are residents and families who may have expectations that they can leave the facility, and even well-meaning families can sometimes fall down. Circumstances can change, but we do want to be very careful with our vulnerable elders, sending them out to situations that have red flags all over them, so that the nursing home team has a lot of good information that the ADRC needs, but the nursing home team should not be making all of these decisions about feasibility and non-feasibility on their own. That's what Section Q is saying. The government, the CMS has created a national network of ADRCs for this express purposes. They are to be utilized through referrals for residents that seek additional information. And then the two groups come together and talk about, because you hold this valuable information, but they hold valuable information as well and have access to records and information. So everyone needs to understand that we're all there for the resident, that it's resident-centered planning. So we want you to begin to see the ADRC as your partner, as your valuable partner in community in planning for discharge. As a nursing home social worker, I want you to also be aware that Section Q has really broadened the traditional definition of discharge planning. We're very good at our discharge planning for our short stay residents, but now the expectation is that you will have care plans for long-term care residents who do desire to have options counseling and to be considered for an ADRC referral. And this is what I'm talking about, that each team, the nursing home internal team and the ADRC team, hold a piece of the puzzle. Certainly, when you go to YouTube, to the CMS website, you'll see that CMS is encouraging nursing homes to invite the ADRC staff member who's participating in an active referral to be part of your long-term care and to attend your care planning meetings. That would certainly be considered a best practice from CMS. So it's clear that we need to begin to develop relationships. And in fact, the project manager, Chris Oakes, is exploring additional trainings in which we'll sit down together and do more interactive work. This training today is considered to be step one. to get us all on the same page with this MDS Section Q. Also, I'd like you to know that there currently is a pilot project that's going on in the state of Delaware. It's a collaboration between the Care Transitions team, Andy Wozney's group, and the state skilled nursing facility discharge planning teams that are working out a lot of these processes and the dynamics of how these transfers will occur. I would refer you to the RAI manual for the expectations of CMS concerning discharge planning for nursing homes. What's important for us to know, and I think that the audience brought this up already, is that we have to have adequate planning or the discharge will fail. Residents can end up back in the hospital or back in the nursing home, and we can have negative outcomes. However, what was very hopeful from this morning's discussion was when we heard the money follows the person, that out of 56 residents, only 2 residents or 3 residents returned to the nursing home. So the success rate currently, even in these early stages of the development of this process, are extremely high. And so we're very pleased that elders are receiving services at home and are able to stay at home. The RIA manual discusses what's considered to be minimum discharge instructions. So I would refer you to that. It is quite extensive. In fact, I have 3 slides here that list everything that's covered in that RIA manual. I have included that section in your handouts. You may want to begin by looking at your discharge forms and your discharge process for your short stay residents before you reinvent the wheel. But these would be some minimum expectations for any long stay resident as a discharge instruction, whether they go to the ADRC or not. They should have discharge instructions. I've included 2 CMS free publications in your packet. One is called your Discharge Planning Checklist, and that can be given by hospital discharge planners or nursing home discharge planners on admission. I'm going to show you how you can access that, but in addition to that, you'll see that I've put a little ADR sticker to customize this for Delaware. What we're going to do is everyone who has registered with us today, that's given us their email address, I will send you the downloads of this handout, of the sticker page, and of the other handout. And in a few minutes, I'm going to run through how you can get the really nice glossy copies from CMS. But in the meantime, you can begin to download them yourselves. These are CMS publications that CMS considers important for our Medicare beneficiaries to receive. And I would strongly encourage you to include this particular handout in every nursing home admission packet as soon as you possibly can, because it will help you in proving that you are embracing not only the spirit, but the requirements of the Olmstead Act in providing information right from the get-go that residents have the right to get information, not to necessarily be discharged, but to get information. All right, making successful outcomes. Although there is currently no state survey automatic trigger to review Section Q and referrals to the ADRC, I think that it is timely and would be very proactive for nursing home teams to begin to take a look at their discharge processes. As I viewed the YouTube training from CMS, the guest speaker was cagey, and she said, at this time, we have decided not to be very prescriptive in bringing the state survey agency into reviews of Section Q. However, as we move forward and refine this process, we anticipate that we will bring state survey in alignment with the rebalancing efforts. And so this is very typical CMS language. CMS commonly rolls out a new requirement, a new mandate like Section Q. They do a demonstration project, which has already occurred, and the pilot project is available, and I'm going to show you that, where that you can get that information. They work out the bugs, they tweak the system, and then they roll it out nationwide. And then they sit back and collect some data. In the meantime, the Administration on Aging has a financial pot that is going out to the ADRCs to try to support this effort. But sooner or later down the road, CMS will probably rewrite the regs, and we will see increased survey and certification compliance requirements coming into alignment as CMS marries everything together. So my point is this: I encourage you to be proactive in taking a look at your discharge processes. And as Quality Insights of Delaware, as your quality improvement organization, we like to talk about creating Discharge Champion and how the process actually becomes operationalized. Give someone within the nursing home the accountability and the responsibility for actually making the change. Of course, the no-brainer would be that it would be the social worker. I would then have a small team that would include the director of nursing, would include the administrator, and I would review the current policies and procedures. You can use Section Q as your example. In fact, Section Q, the CAW number 20, I think would be a great place to start for some discharge policies and procedures. Certainly take a look at your admission packet and add that handout, the resident rights handout. I also encourage you to be aware that one of the intents of Section Q is that if a resident has expressed that they desire more information and that there is a referral to the ADRC in process, that the expectation that would be that the care plan would include the nursing home supporting the resident in their current level of functioning, so that we know housing will be an issue, and we know that this is not an overnight transition. We would hope that we are doing everything possible for the resident to maintain their functional ability to open and close doors, to open and close buttons, to open and close cans, to walk, to transfer. Whatever the nursing home can actively support the resident's current level of functioning or even improve it should be considered part of the discharge process on the nursing home side of things, while the ADRC team, the care transitions team, and the money follows the person folks are trying to line up the community supports that would be necessary. It would be a shame if the resident declined as a result of lack of exercise or splints or necessary implementations as a result of the time that it might take to implement this process, and that you also consider inviting the ADRC team member to care conference when discharge issues are being discussed for that resident. So what our goal is that you get to know your ADRC team and that they get to know their nursing home team. Q500. Now we're getting to the meat of it. This is about return to the community, and there are two questions. The underlying intention of the return to the community item is to ensure that all individuals have the opportunity to learn about home and community-based services and to have the opportunity to receive their care in the least restrictive setting possible. At the initial admission assessment and subsequent follow-up assessments as applicable, you ask, has the resident been asked about returning to the community? No. Yes, and their previous answer was no. Yes, and their previous response was yes. That's a skip pattern. And yes, the previous response was unknown. And then B, this is the key question of the entire section. Has the resident, ask the resident, do you want to talk with someone about the possibility of returning to the community? Yes or no? This is where you're required to provide a referral to the ADRC if the resident answers yes. So it's very important that you complete 0500 correctly. The intent requires that the resident be asked directly and formalizes the opportunity for the resident to be informed of and consider her options to return to community living. It ensures that the resident's desire to learn about the possibility will be obtained and appropriate follow-up measures will be taken. Because CMS has found that in many cases, individuals requiring long-term care services and even their families were unaware of community-based services and supports that could adequately support individuals in living situations. Again, the RII manual warns us we should never assume that any particular resident is unable to be discharged. So that goes back to that feasibility question. Very seldom would we answer discharge is determined to be not feasible if you are operating within your own nursing home and you have not spoken to the experts at the ADRC. The nursing home should code no only after you fully explored the resident's preferences and possible home and community-based services and options. And most likely that requires your participation and consultation with the ADRC. This is so important that the RIA manual actually gives you steps for interviewing. It warns that we understand that residents may feel that their hopes have been raised. It warns that we understand that residents may become fearful that they're going to lose their bed in the nursing home. So these are things that you as social workers understand that you need to reassure residents in both directions. This no way guarantees that you're going out. It only means that you want someone to contact you, someone to come and talk to you about this. And now we all know that that person works with Sharon Dickel. You know what the form looks like. You know that they're going to get a hold of you and let you know that they've received your referral, that they will be coming out. In some states, the transition assessment is done over the telephone, but the state of Delaware has committed that all of the transition assessments will be done face-to-face with the residents. And I think that's a really big advantage. I think it shows a big commitment. I think we're able to do it because we're a small state and because we have strong leadership throughout this department and this division. So that we have to reassure the resident that they won't lose their bed, that it's no guarantee, and that we understand that they want to explore their possibilities. Also, the RIA manual says that if they answer no, it's not a permanent commitment, that they'll be asked again to consider whether they want to learn more, and that they can change their mind at any time. For residents who are interested in returning to the community, it's not as simple as filling out the MDS Section Q, sending the ADRC the electronic or fax referral. But the nursing home team is expected to continue to do discharge planning as you were taught. And this is expanded, and this is where CMS realizes that there are additional resources and time constraints. So this is considered best practice. You may be stretched, and CMS is exploring data and information about this and continuing to look at nursing homes. But there is an expectation that you will participate actively, the discharge planning, that we don't just hand it to the ADRC 100%. So when we code Q0500B, do you want to talk to someone about the possibility of returning to the community? If the answer to that question is yes, the facility is now required to make that referral to the ADRC. And again, in the state of Delaware, that referral means you submit your MDS and you do the electronic referral. And we're going to go through the demonstration and we'll talk it through one more time. In May of 2011, this item was clarified. There was the requirement that you contact them within 10 days. CMS further clarified that this past May to say that 10 business days is considered a reasonable amount of time. So you're not legally bound by 10, There can be vacations and times, you know, in which it goes to 11, but the expectation is that you will try to do this within 10 days. But there is no penalty if you don't make that absolute 24-hour, you know, stroke of midnight on the 10th day. But you are legally required. Okay. 0600, referral. One little item here, has a referral been made to the local contact agency? Here in Delaware, that's the ADRC. No, the determination has been made by the resident and the care planning team that contact not required. No, the referral was not made, or yes. All right, when would you code 0? If the nursing home team can complete the discharge planning on their own. All right, it's a simple discharge. They have a family. They don't need community-based services. They're going to go back home. That's an easy one. So that the determination that the contact was not required. Not that a discharge wasn't required, but the contact wasn't required. Code 1, no, the referral was not made. That's if someone dropped the ball accidentally. And CMS is capturing this. If the resident asked to talk to someone, but the referral was not made, the care planning and progress notes should indicate the status of discharge planning and why a referral was not initiated. So that when 0600 is answered 1, no, and it was not made, this should automatically trigger a CAW completion, Care Area Assessment number 20. It requires a return to the Community Care Area Assessment. This documentation will cover you, and it explains why you did not proceed with the referral to the ADRC. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. So we're here to build relationships. We understand that resource availability and eligibility varies across local communities, from Sussex, Kent to Newcastle, and these often present barriers to allowing some residents to return to the community. However, we have to guard against raising the residents' expectations, while at the same time fully utilizing the ADRC, because they are the ones that know best what might be available. So close collaboration is extremely important. Now, the other thing is, we know that sometimes there will be unanticipated changes in the resident's medical condition, their finances, their family or caregiver support that could cause a transition to be unsuccessful, and they may not be able to leave the nursing home despite a plan that had gone quite far down the road. And you realize as social workers at that time that your support and your psychological assistance will be gravely needed by the residents. If the resident requested information about community living supports in 0500 and the referral was not made, you're to do further assessment and information gathering, and that's the Care Area Assessment number 20. It's a checklist that helps you to do further assessment. If it shows that a referral should have been initiated, it'll talk you through that, then you should initiate it at that time. It's located at C82 to 83. I've included a copy in your packet. It looks like this. That's this backside, and you sign it, and that will help you to document that you've done everything possible as a competent discharge planner to assist this resident. And it's going to help with some of these ticklish situations, I believe, that we were discussing earlier. Let's talk a minute about the relationship of Section Q to the survey process. As I said earlier, there is no discrete task that automatically triggers a state surveyor to look at Section Q. They're not required. They aren't default to look at it. However, it is typical that prior to an on-site visit, the state survey team would contact the Ombudsman's office, and the Ombudsman's office may have information from residents, families, or nursing home staff regarding residents who are interested in discharge. And so that information sharing is a normal part of what CMS expects every state to have an interaction in that direction. And it would work for both ways. The ombudsman could have information that the ADRC is not following up in a timely manner. And so the ADRC would need to be prompted to initiate their contacts in a very timely manner. We have not had any incidents of that in the past, but it works for the nursing home team as well as the ADRC team, that there are checks and balances for both. CMS is pursuing the issue, and I'm looking at aligning state survey regulations with Section Q. However, any issues or findings, whether from the ombudsman, whether during the resident council meetings, or with direct interviews with residents that the state survey team might make, if they have any issue or finding that demonstrates that residents are not being referred to the ADRC properly based on Section Q, or that the ADRC is not responsive, should be conducted for further investigation. And of course there are F-tags, and I've included that handout in your packet regarding social services department requirements. And so it's a single sheet of paper in your packet that reviews for you the F-tags related to social services. I've stuck them here. The first one is F-250, and I misspelled this, I'm so sorry. Services include discharge planning services, which is helping to place someone, arranging intake for home services, and assisting with transfers. But again, we're very interested in working together with the ADRC. F-272 has to do with requirement assessment of potential discharges. F-284 has post-discharge plan of care. And there is a survey or probe for this. Is there evidence of a discharge assessment that identifies the resident's needs and is used to develop the discharge plan? Those of you who are proactive and are going to put together a discharge team, I encourage you to also consider looking at the AMDA, the new white paper that came out, Improving Care Transitions Between Nursing Care and Acute Care Hospitals, as well as their clinical practice guidelines, care transitions, and acute change of condition. All right, now for the fun stuff. All right, here is the CMS website page in which you can get all of the information that I've talked about, including the downloads. And it's located at www.cms.gov/community services. And this is what the page looks like. I have it as a favorites on my, if you scroll down, you come down to the downloads section, and the YouTube link that we showed Gladys is under the YouTube channel. And the MDS Section 3 Q resource publication list is right in here. If you click on that link, it looks like this. Now, here you can download those brochures directly to your computer and save them, but then you're going to have to print them out, and they'll be fine, printed out on plain paper. Or you can set up an account and order the products, and they'll come directly to you. I ordered 700 copies of each, so they're currently kind of out of them. But I have a lot in my office, and if you need some, let me know and I'll mail you a bunch. But that's how many you can order at a time, 350. I did an order, and then my secretary did an order. So you can order a bunch of them. Have them, get the stickers from us. We're going to send you the stickers. Put the stickers on that have the Delaware ADRC number, and put them in your admission packet. If you want to download them, or if you want to order them, and you click on that, it'll ask for a username, and you create an account with the password. There's the actual address that you would go to, if you want to just go straight to the publications page in another way. Since they're currently out, what you can do is if you create your account, there's a little link that says, would you like to get a little email notification when they're available again? And I clicked yes, so I haven't heard. Here are the references to my presentation.